Okay, well, Claudia, who is the alias for Charisse, is pulling up the presentation. I will introduce myself. So I live in Connecticut. I'm a neurologist. I've been a neurologist for 30 years. And I was in private practice. And then I went on to Yale faculty. I created a headache service for a big telemedicine company. And but my passion has been as chief medical officer of BeCare Link. And we started BeCare Link. I'm the chief medical officer. We started BeCare Link back in 2019 after my brother-in-law and I lost my sister to an undiagnosed and then poorly monitored disorder. And we realized that we need to do something about that. And my brother-in-law is a digital nerd. And together we realized that we can help providers and patients with digital medicine. So we decided to focus on neurology since that's my passion. So what we are looking to do is we're looking to make healthcare for neurologic patients more accessible, more affordable, and to make it easier for those who are taking care of these patients. Next slide, please. So the challenge is that there's a growing shortage of neurologists. In fact, it's supposed to go down another 19% in the next 3 years. And there is no one there to treat patients with MS and other chronic neurologic disorders. So the demand is way, way greater than the supply. In fact, the primary care doctors are caring for 75% of neurologic patients. So this puts a great burden on the primary care providers. Next slide. The problems that the patients face with the current approach is that they can't get in to see a primary care provider because of location, long wait times, transportation, and affordability. The result is that there's a delayed diagnosis, detection, and delayed initiation of the needed medication. And then once the medication is then prescribed, there's a delay in detection that the medication is not working. And in a time when in neurology, we're having an explosion of new medications, this means that patients are going to have poorer outcomes than they would have otherwise. And there's no field or there's no subspecialty in neurology where that's even more of an issue than in MS, because we have some tremendous medications out there that have changed the whole nature of the disorder. Next slide, please. So for the primary care providers, I can imagine that this is a nightmare. I assume you're all overwhelmed with the number of patients trying to get in, which means that the longer wait times are affecting you because they're banging down your door. You want to get them in, your staff is getting stressed, and you're having shorter and shorter times available to see these patients. So you may have a 10-minute slot or a 15-minute slots to go through all the organ systems. And this is not going to allow for enough time to evaluate neurologic health. So the other thing is that the patients that you're seeing are probably among the most complex patients that you'll see. You don't have the time. And quite frankly, as a neurologist, it took about 10 years into practice till I was really adroit at doing a neurologic exam. There are subtleties. There are new medications coming out every day, or at least every week, and you have to learn them. And you have to learn the side effects, because the more effective, as a rule, the more effective the medication, the more the side effects. Then you have to worry about pre-authorization for the newer medications, and that takes a lot of staff time and it costs money. And then finally, when you've got the patients on the medication, you're going to have difficulty with monitoring the patients for safety and efficacy, because how often can you get them in, right? Where's the time in your schedule? And then most importantly, how do you keep your doors open financially when you're trying to squeeze in all of these people? Next slide, please. So just like everything else, digital solutions are going to be part of the answer. And through digital health and artificial intelligence, our company, BeCare Link, can actually quantify the neurologic exam and help you to make that diagnosis with more confidence, quicker, and also allow you to send reports to people over at the Mass General or Johns Hopkins if you need somebody to take a look and give you an idea of what they think is going on and whether or not it's time to change your medication. Next slide. So what we are a phone-based app. It's really a platform of activities, and therefore it's perfect for remote visits. And some of the primary care providers who are using it are having people do it either the day before when they're entering in their demographics into their EHR, or they're having them do it in the waiting room. The report is generated, and you can therefore look at the report and say, there's no problem here. Let me put the time into the diabetes, or I better make this a problem focused. We assess cognition, vision, cranial nerves, motor, cerebellar, ambulation, fall risk, speech, and mental health. And what's different from us than anything out there is that we're doing this quantitatively. So the majority of it are gamified activities that are measured by the sensors on the phone. So for each activity, we're getting thousands of data points. And although I hate to say this, it actually gives more data than a neurologist picks up. We're not a competition for neurologists. We're a tool. We're a tool for the primary care providers. We're a tool for a general neurologist who doesn't know what the MS disability score is. And then the scores are then compared with normative curves, and they're also compared against previous performance. So you can see whether or not somebody's getting worse over time. Moreover, we capture a lot more data, medical history, lifestyle. It's fast, it's objective, it's got FDA Class 1 clearance. You don't have to worry about HIPAA compliance. And in the end, what you're having is a comprehensive neurologic exam that mimics what's done in the clinic. Next slide, please. So this platform is not just for MS. We started out with MS because we knew that we could train our AI to create a disability score, and I'll get into that in a bit. And then we went on and developed a general neurologic exam that can be used in anyone and can be used to pick up Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. And we have an annual well visit one that you can use once a year, and it assesses fall risk and cognitive health and mental health, and Medicare will pay for those, and you're going to be improving quality of life. So we quantify neurologic progression through gamified apps. We have a very high engagement. People love them. They find them fun. We have evidence-based decision support, which means that if you feel that you need to make a change and you have to get that pre-auth, you can show them that report and say, look, they've gotten worse over time. We have significant growth, grassroots, without paid advertising. We have over 15,000 users, and they're coming back to us at least twice a year. And it's clinically approved, an AI EDSS score for multiple sclerosis. And let me talk about what that is. Next slide, please. So this is going to be an example of some of the activities. So you can see what it is that the patients are going to be doing when they open the app. So I see the sound is not on, so I'm going to do your sound.
Patients to access quantitative neurologic assessments from home with our apps. Let's see each activity. Memory, test the immediate recall.
So they're going to pick the animal that disappears from one of the two boxes.
Vibration, follow the vibration.
So your sensation.
Tap, collect as many coins as possible.
Measures reaction time and cerebellar function.
Arm drift, see if your arms drift with your eyes closed.
Obviously, testing for cortical dysfunction, like a brain tumor or an MS flare.
Snellen, test your visual acuity. Resting tremor, determine if you have a resting tremor.
They put a pen on their under their phone, and we can with very
Visual contrast, test your color vision.
Parkinson's. This is for optic neuritis, so you're testing with an Ishihara test.
Cranial nerve test, check if the nerves to your eyes and face work well.
Testing eye movements, facial asymmetry, and other cranial nerves.
Arm swing, assess your arm swing.
Again, a very important test in assessing for Parkinson's.
25-foot walk, measure how long it takes you to walk 25 feet.
That gives you a host of information.
Arm elevation, let's move your arm up and down.
Motor strength.
Path, drag the tiger along the path to the top.
Cerebellar and fine motor.
Timed up and go, complete a set of movements in a short distance.
Very instrumental in MS evaluations and in Parkinson's.
Code, translate digits to symbols using the provided key.
A cognitive assessment.
Stroop, test your ability to process information.
Cognitive assessment.
Speech, learn more about your speech.
Detects early Alzheimer's, MS flares, etc.
Transcription, test how fast you can type.
Another cognitive test.
Overview, the percentile indicates how the patient performed relative to the general population, and patients can track their progress over time.
So patients immediately can see how they're doing, but then there's also a report that can be generated and sent to the clinician. This way, if a patient has a change, let's say their eye is blurry, they can see that there's a change, they can contact their clinician, they can get the steroids they need that night rather than waiting the 6 weeks, which would change the outcome. The importance is that each one of these tests is based on what we do in the clinic. We didn't make up these tests. And so we have a very strong validation. Now, this is the introduction. It has Dr. Tim Vartanian in it, who is one of the world-renowned MS expert, and how he introduces this to his patients. He's at Cornell.
Hi, Elizabeth.
I was diagnosed with relapsing MS in 2002. I don't do the work that I used to do because I can't. I've been doing okay. I recently have been dropping my foot, catching my left toe as I walk along.
I've had MS for about 37 years. I get a little bit depressed when I see my MRIs and I can see all the scarring on my brain. And I think in my head, I'm worse than I actually am.
I have been living with MS for 6 years now. And then when I gave birth, I had 3 relapses within 3 months after giving birth. And that affected me.
There's a big difference from being diagnosed to today, where I know that I have to make sure that I take care of myself to feel better.
One of the things that's very important for a person living with MS is the way that they lead their life in terms of exercise, nutrition, taking their medication, their outlook, how that influences their disease course. Your sense of what's going on is much more apparent and obvious to you than it is to me when we come in on these short visits. So I'd like to introduce you to an app that we have developed that is designed to quantify your physical, cognitive, and sensory functions, doing tests that you perform at home on your own. The Care app is designed to empower the person living with MS by serving as a tool to chart their well-being and progress. The secure data login becomes a place for vital information in which patients and their providers can spot patterns, identify trends, provide longitudinal data, and customize adjustments in care. The app is based on a series of self-administered tests that assess cognition, strength, mobility, coordination, vision, hearing, and sensation. But the app goes well beyond traditional measurements, including the Expanded Disability Status Scale, known as the EDSS, and the MS Functional Composite, known as the MSFC. The BCare app also stores historical data, treatment information, and connects to other important medical tests, such as the MRI and electronic medical records. With BCare, patients can enhance their management and empower themselves to track their own progress and understand their numbers, while healthcare providers gain a look at their patient's function over time in a way that cannot be obtained during a typical clinical visit.
You need to be empowered to live your life. I don't want MS to weigh me down. To me, it's something that I have. It doesn't have me.
It's nice to feel that someone is watching what's going on with you. So much of MS is what is going on in your head, and you need the objective evidence that maybe things aren't going as badly as you think they are.
Now, taking care of myself physically, mentally, and emotionally has become incredibly important.
Be care. Being the future in care.
Okay, so just for example, in the MS clinic, you're going to calculate the medical history and treatment history, the neurologic exam, an EDSS score, which is the ambulatory score, disability score, and a variety of others. It's done at most once a year, always by somebody different. And so that, the EDSS score is calculated differently each time. And often it's done by a fellow. The BCare link assesses all of this. And it will assess all of this in about half an hour, whereas the MS clinic will be 90 minutes after you've waited for 3 hours, if you can get into one. Next slide, please. So just again, we keep talking about the EDSS scale. Basically, it measures disability. It goes from 0 to 10. 0 is normal, 10 is you've died. And as you get worse, obviously, as the score gets higher, it's very, very, very heavily weighted towards ambulation. Our BCare AI calculates the EDSS, and we've done 2 studies, one at Cornell, one at Yale, that showed that our EDSS score is within 1 point of a clinical EDSS score. And the literature shows that if you take 2 different clinicians, they're 2 points apart. So we're actually doing better because it's an objective, it's the same reviewer each time. This is going to be an amazing tool for the general neurologist, many of whom haven't heard about the EDSS, and the primary care providers. Gives them a tool that objectively tells them, I got to do something, or things are going well. This is really important right now because with the treatments getting better, the majority who were relapsing or remitting are now turning to secondary progressive, which means that they have a slow slide rather than they get better, they get worse, they get better, they get worse. When you have a slow slide, it's very hard to detect that there's been a change, even for the patient. But because we're collecting thousands and thousands of data points, we will detect that change faster. Next slide, please. And this just shows you how the number of patients and they were averaging with an EDSS score of 4. Okay. Next slide. We're FDA approved class 1. We've had studies at Weill, Cornell, and Yale, and George Mason that have validated our studies, our activity and our accuracy, and we've been using a Biogen trial to characterize one of their drugs post-marketing. Next slide, please. Currently, we have the BeCare MS link, the BeCare Neuro link, and the BeCare Health. The BeCare Health is the annual visit, and we have over 15,000 users. We are currently working on Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease, and down the road, ALS and myasthenia. That being said, our BeCare Neuro link will detect almost all neurologic disorders, even though we don't have a dedicated app. Next slide, please. So again, the BeCare Health is what you would bill as the annual well visit, fall risk, cognitive health, and mental health. And you can bill Medicare for that every 6 months. And the BeCare NeuroLink is used as a screener. This is not one that makes a diagnosis, but once it screens, it can be used to track treatment response. And we're most useful in dementia, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and MS. The MS app, on the other hand, is for patients who've already been diagnosed with MS, and we follow their course. Next slide, please. So just again, we've gone over this before. The BeCare MS link has the activities on the left. The BeCare NeuroLink has the same one, but we've added other elements of the general neuro exam that look for Parkinson's and cranial nerve function and more ambulation. And BeCare Health is a much more abbreviated app. And then again, that's for the annual well visit. It probably takes about 10 minutes to do. But if you can intervene when somebody's at risk for falling, or you can detect Alzheimer's early, even preclinically, you can change that person's life. Next slide. In addition to all that, you can upcode. So in addition to your visit code, you can charge remote therapeutic monitoring, online digital evaluation, cognitive testing, balance testing, color vision, and there are many more. We can help with that. But because you're collecting so many more data points, you can collect more per visit, get more information out of it without spending more time. Next slide, please. This is one of our users. Her name is Sandy. I just wanted you to hear what she had to say.
I'm Sandy, and I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 2014 when I could barely walk on my wedding day. I've had to really change my life a bit since then and find tools and resources that really work for me and my everyday life as a working mom. So it's things like obviously healthy diet and, keeping up with my meds and exercising. But I have also discovered this BeCare MS Link mobile app. What it does is it helps me track my MS symptoms, right? So I complete these real quick, kind of fun, gamified activities. And essentially, the AI technology is assessing my motor skills, my balance, my speech, etc. And it's then generating this very precise, quantifiable MS status, which is pretty cool because let's face it, my doctor appointments are few and far between. And when I do get to see the doctor, I can't remember what day I felt what way. So with this mobile app and using it at least on a monthly basis, it makes me feel like I'm in control, and it gives me peace of mind. And it reminds me I need to listen to my body.
And next, I'd like you to hear from clinician, Dr. Stowe. Dr. Stowe has spent at least 4 years in the rural medicine, helping the underserved. And she currently works helping the underprivileged.
Hi, My name is Caroline Stowe. I'm a family nurse practitioner with an additional qualification in headache medicine. I'm excited to speak with you today about the BeCare NeuroLink app. This is an amazing app that provides an objective, quantifiable neurologic exam. Now, I pride myself on doing an excellent neuro exam in office, but when I have so many patients to get through in a day, I know this app will help speed things up. My staff can determine the acuity of a patient complaint to work into my schedule most efficiently with this data. I also appreciate that I can provide additional codes when charting by uploading a copy of the report with the extra data points. Now, speaking as a non-clinician, my grandfather was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and I look back at how many more good days he might have had we had access to this app. Give it a try. You'll find that it's a game changer for both you and your patients.
So we have multiple publications in some very important journals. And we've won quite a few awards. We have a write-up in USA Today. If you're interested in learning more about us, you can click on that link. So to summarize, we're a gamified mobile app with a quantitative and AI-enabled neurologic assessment for all of your neurologic patients. We screen and we monitor. And we're a tool that can help both you and your patients. And it fills what we wanted to do, which is to provide accessibility and affordability. And most importantly, quality in the treatment of neurologic patients. Please reach out to us. There's our, at the bottom of the slide is our email. And if you go to our website, you can learn more about us there too. Thank you. I really appreciate being invited for this ECHO presentation, and I hope that we hear from some of you.
Great, so we have about 30 minutes left. So if anyone has any questions or anything, go ahead and just unmute or put it in the chat so that way we can, yeah, go ahead, Eric.
Cool idea. I like components of this. I guess for MS, kind of 2 points. I think for Alzheimer's, early detection, that's really great. I mean, that's having your regular doctors kind of guide that screening be extremely important. And to sort of quantify who really needs to go to the high level memory center or whatnot. I mean, our wait list is probably like 9 months, like it's insane. Since we got these new drugs that maybe work. So I see that as extremely helpful. I do worry about the psychogenic manifestations and how the app would pick up on those, particularly a tremor.
It's pretty much controlled for that because it's hard to fake a tremor in exactly the right hertz, unless maybe if you're a neurologic specialist.
Sure.
So we're not going for any tremor. We're going for a certain range of tremor.
Okay.
And certain consistency. Plus, tremor is only one of several of the assessments for Parkinson's, right? Mm-hmm. So we have the turnabout, we have, arm swing, which is very invaluable, and the cognitive impairment. But yes, I agree with you. For Alzheimer's, the primary care provider is now picking it up 80% of the time. But even when it's a neurologist who's trained in this, the data is showing that using the traditional way that we test people, we're picking it up only 60% of the time. I mean, only better than a hand flip. But this is objective data, and this is a way to track somebody over time. And again, we're not making the diagnosis. We're giving it to you to use in conjunction.
Gotcha. So this is not like a PCPs use it as a alternative to neurology assessment. That would be a little concerning.
That would be concerning. No, we're not cutting my field out. But I mean, how long does it take to get, yeah, I mean, I'm in the Northeast, we're flooded with neurologists and you can't, it's still like a 6-month wait, right? But if you have a test that's very abnormal and you call up and say, we have this objective data, you're more likely to get a telehealth visit to get the ball rolling. So it's a tool. We're not replacing doctors, but in some of our assessments are better than clinicians. And I say that with a heavy heart as a neurologist.
I have kind of a personal hatred for the EDSS in MS because I think it's just so variable between providers. And honestly, I think the data is exaggerated on their inter-provider relatability because that was probably a very controlled setting. In reality, it's probably not that. It's even worse. So that is interesting to have a little bit more consistent version. It's just, I think right now, even if we identify secondary progression, we're still kind of like, uh-oh, we don't have anything great right now.
There's a new drug out of the gate by Ibotta.
Yeah.
And so now we actually do have a drug for progressive MS. So the field is improving. And if you're on Tysabri, maybe it's time for you to go to Ocrevus. If you're on Ocrevus, maybe it's time to go to Lemtrada. So obviously you're going to higher and higher risk, but that you're merited in doing that. And I agree with you about the EDSS, but remember that the scores that we're giving are for each individual task. So right now the EDSS is the gold standard. I believe that the timed up and go is going to replace it. We do that. If somebody only has optic neuritis, that's what they're presenting with, you can just look at the Ishihara data if that's all you're interested in. So it's one of those modalities. You're not just looking at the EDSS, you're looking at each of the different functions.
Sure.
Thank you, Dr. Litchman. I think this is an incredible tool, especially for rural providers, to have more information that they can share with neurologists and keep track of the changes in their patients' baseline. I was curious about the screening tools. So if a patient were to use a screening tool and it came back with some results that were concerning, are there next steps for patient, any kind of where to reach out to, what to do next step with some of those results?
Right. So we're trying to get this, we're trying to get the American Academy of Family Practitioners and, others to advertise this to their members so that they can use this. So if a patient decides to do this and sees in the overview that they're abnormal, they can have a report sent to their clinician, and then it's up to their and we will let them know we're taking 30%. If you're in the bottom 30th percentile, that's when you really should start looking. And we were looking at the data yesterday on the cognitive testing. And remember that cognition is part of the presentation of MS. It's also, Parkinson's and not just Alzheimer's. And if somebody scores one abnormal score out of the 4, they have a 90% correlation with a patient report of memory loss. So it seems to be very sensitive. But it's a screening tool, right? If we had 100% success rate, then we're doing something wrong, right? When you go, I remember being taught, yes, there were MRIs when I started out. If you're getting an abnormal result on every MRI you order, then you are under ordering, right? Because you're missing. So you need to set the limits so that you're going to be raising suspicion at sometimes when there's no problem there, and that's the tool for the clinician to take over and then send us back to us, partner with us to monitor it if you do make that diagnosis.
I do greatly agree about the physical exam. So unfortunately, even neurologists aren't good at the physical exam, and it's kind of dying. And then general practitioners doing a comprehensive neuro exam is just not gonna happen. So it's nice to have some kind of replacement.
I mean, it's just not going to happen, right? So you send a first-year neurology resident to do an exam. They're going to do the entire neuro exam from A to Z, right? And it's going to be 45 minutes without the history. And that's what happens to every resident, because as we have shorter time and we're listening to what the complaints are, we're limiting our exam. But because this is so short, we can actually assess the whole thing in a short period of time. And don't forget the remote component, because that really makes a big difference here. And, you know, I think the data was in the US, 90% of people who make $50,000 or more have a smartphone, and 80% of people who make 50,000 or less have a smartphone. So this is really a tool that's going to work anywhere.
And I like that the activities are short, engaging, fun. How often do participants on the app have to engage? How consistent do they have to be with the activities for the most accurate measurements?
No, each measurement is accurate. Really, it's the trend that you're worried about, right? So in terms of relapsing or remitting, let's suppose that somebody with MS is seen in January, each January. And in the course of the year, they've had 3 flares, but then they've returned to 100% clinically each time. Well, they go back to their doctor in January, they look fine. The doctor says, you're fine. But if they had captured the flare and shown the abnormality, you know, during the flares, then in between, then that would work. So if somebody was completely stable, once a year is fine. If it's somebody who's starting a new medication, once a month. I mean, this is totally is dictated by the patient and by the clinician.
Thank you.
I really see this as a, oh, we lost somebody. I really see this as a great way to like screen people for memory clinic and possible use of the new drugs. If you're a certain cutoff, you're too far gone. If you're just a little bit impaired, great, get an MRI. If your MRI shows that your brain is bad, not a candidate. It would be really a nice way to expedite some of that, because it's just impossible right now. And we're missing windows.
Think about Leqembi, right? I don't know if you're familiar with Leqembi, but Leqembi is one of the new, one of the 3 new ones that are, and there are more coming, that are cleaning the amyloid out. Leqembi is not a lifelong drug. So the average use of it is only 18 months. So they continue to give the drug until the PET scan shows there's no amyloid left. Well, PET scans are really expensive.
So and often not approved.
And often not approved and often not available, right? People are going to have to travel pretty far. So if they can follow the clinical exam to say, uh-oh, you know, or let's say, you know what, they've gotten a lot better. They're actually now scoring at 50% or above. Let's do the PET scan now, because maybe we can stop that Leqembi.
Hi, Dr. Litchman. Thank you so much for the presentation. I was wondering, for any of the activities that the patients are completing on the application, do you find that there is ever difficulty in them completing those accurately? And is there a best practice during introduction of the app for a clinician to ensure that they're doing the activities accurately and properly?
No, I mean, that's a very good point. There's some internal controls where we can tell that it's not being done correctly. We love to see people do it 2 days in a row to see, you know, so if there's a big difference, then we can flag that. And but I think the best thing is, like, when we were running the clinical trials, is we had a nurse or an MA, if you have one available, just run through the activities with them, show them how to do it once, and then they won't forget. Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
One more. I'm curious with the massive amount of of data that this can collect and help with screening and treatment. Do you have long-term plans for use of that data to help in care or understanding the symptoms better?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So, just Biogen was using us. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Tisabri. Tisabri is an infusion for MS. And they always talk about the feel-good effect. So the patients don't know why, but they feel better. And then at about week 3, because it's given every month, they start to feel worse. They have no idea what that means. So our app can test what's different. Maybe it's depression, maybe it's ambulation. So we're hoping to be used by CROs, the contract research organizations, to get products onto the market faster, more efficiently, with better data. Because again, most of those trials, the neurologic exam is not being done by a neurologist or somebody with training, where we can answer a simple question. So again, drug companies want to know, does dizziness come along with this? Well, we collect all of that information. It's also a walking EHR for people with MS, because in there we collect their treatment history, their limiting symptoms, when their relapses were. So when they go to a new doctor, they can just show them their answers. It'll save a tremendous amount of time. But my dream would be to be used as a companion app, right? So something like Abata, which is for progressive MS, I think a companion app for a pharma, I think would be fantastic.